Today we're celebrating International Mother Languages Day. In this session, we have Alexandra Husinot kindly joining us to talk about how she uses languages in her world of work. Alexandra will tell her career story and share experiences, and we will invite you to ask questions as well. My name's Louise, I'm hosting the session today. We're working to inspire and support students to make informed decisions about your future by enabling you to meet inspirational role models and hear real-life stories. The skill we're focusing on today is speaking foreign languages, which is increasingly relevant where we're all citizens in a global village. To the audience at home, your audio, video and chat function has been disabled for safeguarding purposes, but please do use the question and answer box. And we are recording this session and it will be featured on our Founders for Schools digital YouTube channel. So sit back, enjoy the webinar and please do ask questions. So over to you, Alexandra. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. How should we start? What do you want me to tell you?
I would like you to tell us, please, and the people at home, where you work and what your job title is, please.
Right. So I'm the founder of Immersionn. We are a content discovery company focusing on 3D technology and 3D web. Basically, we're trying to bring, if you want, some sort of game world into the professional world, into our web of every day. Before that, I did a whole career in the telecommunications sector for the majority of my years, somewhat by accident. And I did a few years in the insurance sector, and then I decided to create and found my own company 2.5 years ago.
Wow, what an exciting journey. And your company now sounds absolutely amazing. So immersing the gaming world into the world of work. Is that right?
That's right. Maybe if you want now or later, I can show you a couple of graphics because it gives you an idea of what it is, which is usually quite stunning or surprising graphically for people to see what we do.
Yes, certainly. If you could bring them up later on, that I would certainly love to see them. Thank you. So what is a normal day like in your job?
There is not really a normal day because it's still a startup. We are a small team. There is about 8 people in the team, of which 3 are permanent or full-time and the others are part-time. So as a CEO and founder, I end up, doing all sorts of things that the company needs. I try to steer my time as much as possible towards sales and business development. I think as a CEO, that's just because of my personality and my skills, this is where naturally my strongest position became. So that's where I'm trying to steer my time towards. So you could find other CEOs in other startups or companies that will be more product and technology driven, others that might be more of operationally driven execution. But I'm definitely the sales and business development. We call it the hunter as well sometimes in the field. You know, you've got hunters and farmers. Once I've hunted, then I can pass it on to my team who's going to farm.
I like that. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you. So you were you mentioned your skills there, and this is languages in the world of work. And you mentioned the you'd worked in communications and insurance as well, and now startup. You're CEO of your own startup. So can you tell us a bit more, please, about your language abilities and how you use them and how you have used them in the world of work?
Yes, that's great. So I'm French, as you might still hear after more than 20 years. I didn't completely erase the accent, but I'm told it's okay, it's charming. So that's one good thing about being a foreigner somewhere. You've got your accent often has a connotation and a charm for people in the country. So I'm French. I escaped French as soon as I could when I was 18. I always liked languages, by the way. Even before I escaped France, by the way, I studied for half a year Russian because it was the beginning of the fall of the Berlin Wall and where the whole of Eastern Europe was opening at that time. And I thought Russia is going to be a massive thing. And if I can speak Russian, which nobody does, or so I thought, then I'm going to be in a great position for international business with Russia. I realized very quickly that a lot of people spoke Russian. Actually, all of the Russian people spoke Russian, and quite a big chunk of the Russian population spoke French and English, which I thought was going to be my USP, right? The French person who speaks Russian. Quite a few Russian students were in Paris in the same class as me. So, of course, in a very few weeks of time, I realized I'm never going to be able to catch up because their learning speed is maximum. So just something to take into account. Like I think what I did next was much more interesting, which was to leave France and go to Spain. I think if you really want to learn languages, you have to go in the country, and you have to immerse not only with the language but also with the culture. In the end of the day, the language is the expression of a culture. And so you will not only learn the words, but what they really mean in the sense of the people. So I've gone to Spain. Then I was very young and I met a very handsome Swedish man. And that took me to Sweden. And then I learned, in my first few years in Sweden, I learned English first because my English was not good enough. It was a school learned English, but not good enough for everyday use. And so I spent the majority of the first 2 years learning really to use my English, of course, not in a proper British way, more of into a European or international way. But still it was a big step. And then after that, I started to learn Swedish. And because my company, Ericsson at the time, paid for Swedish lessons, I actually learned, I had 20 hours of Swedish lessons. That's not a lot, right? 20 hours. And that kind of unlocked the last 2 years where I passively listened to the language without knowing or realizing I was learning. And all of the more. And we did probably of the 20 hours, we probably did 10 hours of singing, learning songs, because people have different ways of learning, but I have a very hearing, melodious type of way of learning. And so we realized together with the teacher that by giving me songs to learn, I was of course learning the vocabulary, but also through the melody, I was naturally learning the grammar. So that was it. And then of course I had the Swedish boyfriend, so I could apply and friends, I could apply my Swedish, right, in the real world and listening to Swedish people. Then I moved to Germany. I didn't manage to learn German. And that's a regret. That's a big regret because I lived 4 years in Germany. It's a difficult language, I felt, due to grammar and the accent. Perhaps because I'm French, it felt less natural for me coming from the Latin language. Then I moved to Italy, I think it was, learned Italian. I didn't go to learn it, but I understood it, mixing my French and my Spanish. I sort of understand 80% of an Italian. I respond to them with a Spanish which I put an Italian accent and tone to it, and we sort of understand each other. And the same with Danish. Danish and Swedish are very close, and you just adapt a little bit the style and accents.
That is quite a list of countries and languages that you have learned and used. So we've got Russian, Spanish, English, Swedish, a bit of Italian, a bit of Danish, and of course your mother language, which is French.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, and you've mentioned a couple of things there about ways that you learn the language, and also how once you've learned one language, it can open up another language.
Yes, It's very strange. I don't have all the explanations, of course, how the brain works, but it seems that the more you add to it, the more it becomes flexible at adapting to new languages and new possibilities. I think it goes beyond. It probably goes beyond language. By the way, it's a dynamic that maybe it opens your mind to different ways of thinking. In general. So I feel that in my work, I can connect the dots, if you see what I mean, between things that maybe a less trained brain wouldn't. Because the brain, you know, is a muscle, right? Something you train. Of course, we all have different capabilities, but I believe that there is a lot, it's got a lot to do with what you do with it and how you program yourself. So yeah, I think the benefits are really big. However, over the years, the only negative is I speak many languages, but I don't speak any of them properly. So my lexicon of words is, I would say, more limited than someone that speaks one or two languages. And I think it tends to be true for most people I've met that speak many languages. And actually, I'm a bit ashamed sometimes when I go back to France and I hear my friends speaking. I might understand what they say, huh? The words that I don't use, I understand what they mean because it's my mother tongue, but I never use them, and they are like way back in my brain. And the same happens with my Swedish, my English, etc. So that's the negative side, and some. I guess in terms of your native language, so in my case, French, people don't realize that I'm not exactly French anymore. So they can be a bit surprised at my small vocabulary. It's more easy in the other languages, like in English, for example, since you can hear I'm not English, you don't expect me to have the best English. It's even okay that I can do a couple of grammatic errors, right? But in my own language, people are quite less accepting. So that's an interesting point to think about. You know, if you're thinking of going back, maybe keep reading in your mother tongue more than I do.
That is very interesting. Thank you. That's a great point. And you mentioned the benefits of, you think knowing a lot of languages helps you to join the dots in your work. What other benefits does having all of these languages, being able to communicate, bring to your work?
I think it's empathy. So empathy meaning being able to put yourself in the other people's shoes, because many different cultures and so languages express themselves slightly differently. So you can read a broad range of responses on people, and they translate in the same thing. So this ability to read, I guess, a culture and what a response sometimes might not, if you wouldn't know that, you might get confused. You know, I always love this, I have this memory of Italians are very expressive, right? Or they can be. And I remember one time in my Italian times where a client came out of a meeting room very mad after making a massive scene, which you never see in the corporate world. Like you would never see that in Sweden or in Germany. I think neither in the UK, but in Italy it was, you know, expected. He stormed out of the room and slammed the door and see you next time. And, you know, it was very theatrical and big. It's just the way that people express, it's just the level that things are expressed out there. And you need to be aware of that. And that doesn't mean that's the end of it's not the end of the relationship with the client. So being able to read that and understand the parameters is interesting. Maybe something I love about an English example, when I was less into the UK culture, and I was actually sitting in Germany but working with the UK. I remember some feedback I got about the presentation of a product, and the client says, yes, that's really interesting. What an amazing product. I am sure you will have no problem finding customers for it. So I came out of the meeting thinking, fantastic, you know, he loves it, he's going to buy the product, blah, 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 blah. When it was absolutely obvious, I think, for any person from the UK, that the fact that he mentioned that other customers would love it meant, of course, that it wouldn't be him.
Oh.
And yeah, UK British can have this very diplomatic, hyper diplomatic, to the point that you misunderstand what they're actually saying. So that's where understanding the culture more than the language is important.
That is fascinating. What an insight. Thank you. You've talked about when you worked in insurance and in communications as well. Do you think your languages helped you to progress in those areas? Did you use them a lot?
In the field of work as such, I don't know, because it just really helps you to communicate better with people and to grasp some information that maybe they wouldn't share in their non-native language. But I'm not sure in the actual field of, like, in the technical side of things, it changes much. Again, it's more about reading and interpretation, I feel.
Yeah, thank you. And you talked a number of ways that you learned languages. You talked about going to classes, and you talked about learning it through living there with friends and singing. So what was your favorite way to learn a language?
I think probably the best way, my favorite way, was the Spanish, the first language, right? Because I was 18 and I just went to Spain, and I was lucky to meet a lot of new friends at the time, and we were just, you know, really partying and having fun. I didn't learn any, it didn't feel like I was learning or making any effort learning. However, I did have a base. I did study at school Spanish for 4 years before that. So I had the grammar and the basic. But it wasn't, I couldn't speak it properly or anything. But once I went there, that was amazing. So that's why I really think that just going to the country and immersing and making friends is so important. And I would say at least for a good 1 year, in order to get in, up to 3 years, in order to really grasp the culture. Because if you just travel in and out, you will speak the language, but you will not grasp the depth of the culture. And that is as important. That's what allows me to laugh sometimes. When you can understand jokes, that's probably when you're there with the culture. You've got it.
Yeah.
Jokes are often very cultural, and some jokes are really not funny translated. Most of the jokes are really not funny translated. International jokes are very few.
That's right. So when you find yourself laughing at a joke, you know that you've got it. Oh, brilliant. And you mentioned that you thought you would go and learn Russian kind of politically, and you could see an opportunity that there would be a demand for Russian. Was that your main inspiration for learning languages?
Why was I feel like I was always inspired to learn languages. You know, I think that's why in the end in my life I ended up living in so many different countries. You have to put it back in the times and in the context as well. Perhaps this influenced me. We were at the very early days of Europe, or basically when I went to Spain, Europe was going to open its borders a year later. So we were not yet into Europe with the borders open, but we were at the edge and at the promise of that. So my generation couldn't wait to just get out and go and explore the world without limitation. There was also the generation that did Erasmus, which was a big program where you could exchange, right? You could spend a while abroad in Europe and as part of your university program. So that I think has had a big influence on me, because just this opportunity upon our eyes that we were now able to just go everywhere without having to, we had to show a passport maybe, but that's it really. You didn't even have to show a passport actually if you go by car from France to Germany, right? You don't have to show a passport, you don't need a visa, you don't need anything. So I think this is still there in the generation today. I think this has grown. I was just an early one. I've seen this with my younger cousins who are 10 years, 15 years younger. They still have that and more. It's almost like the world is their oysters, and they are actually going even beyond Europe these days.
I really like that. Yes, the world is their oyster. Absolutely. Yes. And speaking to young people who are learning languages at the moment, we've had a question through about, what about watching films in foreign languages? What do you think about that as practice or for learning about the language?
It's hard when you don't know the language at the beginning. When you're not fluent, it's very hard. However, so what you can do perhaps is keep the subtitles in your own language, but still grasp the audio, because the brain works passively anyway. What you will earn is still hearing the proper tone of voice and the proper accent. The melody of a language has got a meaning in itself. And you know, in France, we dub every film. Everything is in French dubbed. So an American film is French, and French people can't really hear. Original versions are very rare, unless you go on Netflix, of course. But if you're on TV, it doesn't exist. That's really weird. It's like it denatures completely almost the original director piece. It's even more impactful. I find I really like a lot of the Asian films. Japanese, Korean are amazing at films. Chinese do some amazing pieces as well. And if you're going to put an English voice on top of that, I don't know, it's like you're missing I don't speak any of those languages, but I can feel the culture through the language. So yeah, I would say it's a very good training, I think, for discovering the culture. I would advocate, if you're not fluent, to keep the subtitles, get the audio in the original language, and then if you become very fluent, my kids are speaking 3 languages, and I'm the one forcing them on the French, right? Then you know, you should force yourself, if you can, of course, to do the full original one, because the brain works non-stop.
There's some really great tips there. Thank you for that. And to the people who love languages at school but aren't quite sure what they want to do when they leave school, does that matter? What would you say to them?
Aren't quite sure about what they will do, like in terms of job, do you mean? Yeah. I think you should, you don't need to always know everything in life, you know, you just have to follow your heart, and you don't need to plan. I know when you are young, you wanna know what you're gonna be. But a combination of life and yourself will find out along the way what you're gonna be. I didn't know that I was gonna end up in Sweden. And I ended up in Sweden, if you followed the story, because I went to Spain to have fun and learn Spanish for a little while. And then I met a Swedish man with whom I fell in love, and then I went to Sweden. I was doing my studies by distance, by the way, at the time, which allowed me to move around like that. Then in Sweden, Ericsson happened to be the biggest employer in Sweden, alongside with another company called ABB. And I was looking for an internship because my studies required me to do an internship. And so I happened almost by accident to fall into the telecommunications sector as a career, and it never left me because it was, of course, it was fascinating to work with mobile phones, you know. So it's like life naturally finds its path. I think just going abroad and learning languages will open just so many opportunities.
Yes, thank you. Opening the doors, and life will follow its path and find its way. Thank you so much. And we've got a couple of minutes left. I'm going to ask people at home to complete the poll that's in the chat box. If you had some of the images from your work that you'd like to show, if you have them, I think we can allow that.
Actually, it's a little bit about languages as well. We are betting that the future of websites is going to be visual, so you don't need any text, you don't need any language. The language is the images. So this is one of the piece of work we've done where we are presenting the world of a conference. It's a conference of a client where different buildings are represented, and you can immerse and find out more about the different pieces of content of that event, and then you can buy tickets. This is another one we are doing for the UK government to present the opportunity of 5G for the creative industries. And again, we've had a lot of fun creating a beautiful 3D image with a dragon that spits fire. And from there, you can go and explore the different exhibition halls where you will discover products and suppliers of the products. So that's, yeah, in short, that's what we do. It's quite different and innovative. It's definitely a lot of fun, and we spend a lot of time trying to understand what do we want to communicate here. So it is a form of language. Image is a form of language.
It is. That is absolutely fascinating. Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us for this session. I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the people at home have as well. We really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.